Hi, I'm actually a teacher here at Naugatuck High School, and before I get to my question, I just wanted to point out, as far as the proposed cut to the teachers' retirement board health insurance, I think that's a pretty dangerous proposal. I think it sets a bad precedent for state funding for the retirement board health insurance for the future. And I think it sends a bad message to young teachers who are looking for a career in education in Connecticut. But my question is actually about...
Let me respond to that one, and then we can ask the next one, so I don't lose it.
Yeah.
What we propose is a temporary measure, so that we can live within the spending cap and the revenue cap that we have, and ultimately it's our obligation to pay it. So it's an we don't dismiss the obligation. I understand your point. I'm trying to put money, I mean, you're a teacher here. I'm trying to send $95 additional per student. We could wipe that out, or we can do some things that get us through a very slow-growing economy, and so I chose that. But if the legislature wants to take money out of the ECS formula or some other pot of money, but the pool of money in the next 2 years, and certainly in the next year, is not going to get bigger. We can't raise taxes, and we have a spending cap. So it really is trying to balance those two things. In fact, just because you're a relatively new teacher, we have put hundreds of millions of dollars into the teacher retirement fund. I'm putting in hundreds of millions of dollars to meet our obligation with respect to other state employees, because my predecessors entered into transactions where they didn't agree to fund those on an actuarial basis. So when I became governor of the state of Connecticut, we had the worst funded pension plan in America, funded at about 42%. Now I'm trying to overcome that, as well as a sluggish economy, as well as having to meet healthcare needs, and grow jobs. And so it's a balancing act. I put forward a document that represents how I think we should do it. No document that the governor puts forward as a budget is the final budget that gets adopted. But I would just caution you that these folks don't want to see their taxes go up. And I've heard that. And when I became governor, we had a 17% deficit, the largest per capita deficit in the entire nation at $3.6 billion. We've wrestled that down quite a bit, and this is a budget I think keeps us on the road to doing that, but I understand.
Thanks for your response to that. It might come up in another question, but my question is actually about the DEEP's comprehensive energy strategy.
Yes.
And why natural gas is such a focal point of that, given the environmental concerns surrounding water contamination from hydrofracking, greenhouse gas emissions during that process, and when we're kind of at this point of potential climate crisis, why Connecticut is participating in the demand for this cheap natural gas that is a finite resource that is going to contribute to that really problematic climate change, and not more aggressively pursuing renewable alternative energy.
Sure. We're aggressively pursuing all energy. Our mantra in the state of Connecticut when it comes to energy is we want cleaner, cheaper, and more reliable. And our policy is designed, as we presented it, and we had a long comment period for that, to bring this cheaper, cleaner, and more reliable. So let's just talk about natural gas for a moment. Natural gas, with respect to that which is released to the atmosphere upon combustion, is a fraction of what gets released as a result of that same burning with respect to coal or for oil, for that matter. It is, I suppose, to some extent, a bridge to a cleaner, cheaper, more reliable fuel source. Right now, we're paying the highest electric cost in the nation. We're paying some of the highest oil bills in the nation. In fact, when I became governor of the state of Connecticut, electric bills were 12% higher than they are today, and they've been the second highest in the nation for the better part of a decade. By the way, I suspect that affects the competitiveness of businesses in our state. So, when you're in my position, you're trying to balance a whole bunch of things. But let me then answer your question about our role. Listen, natural gas we represent a tiny portion, about 1%. You want to argue 2% of the entire nation's population. Right now, with respect to natural gas, we have a 30% penetration rate for home use. Compared to Massachusetts and Rhode Island that are 50%, and New Jersey that's at better than 75%. Which means we're saying to our citizens, you have to pay a higher cost for a substance that damages the environment to a greater extent. Because we had a series of rules in place, and I'll explain it to you. In Massachusetts, if a gas company wants to extend a line, they're required to recover their cost in 25 years. They extended lines in Massachusetts. We had a rule in our state that if you did that, you had to recover your cost in 15 years, which meant that you had to take so much of the cost of extending that line into a city or town and recover it from ratepayers in 15 years as opposed to 25 years. And not surprisingly, when you had that built into your law, lines didn't get extended because nobody wanted to pay those kinds of rates. So just by simply changing that one rule, going to the national average of 25 or 30-year recovery period of time, will allow additional extension of natural gas, a cleaner, a cheaper way to heat a home. I think we should give our citizens that choice whenever we can give them a choice. They can stay on oil. They can stay on oil. But your same arguments about, I mean, oil is not cleaner than natural gas. And you know, those are a couple of thoughts that come to mind. But listen, I'm with you. I've been talking about climate change since 1997, when at the invitation of Al Gore, I attended a conference on it at Columbia University. I'm an adherent to believing that some of the things that we've seen in our own state in the last 2 years. We've had 5 natural disaster declarations in a period of 2 years. Something's going on. And I've been a proponent of that, but it's hard to argue that oil is cleaner than gas.
Yeah, and just to wrap up, I think it's a false choice between gas and oil. And I think, you know, even though some might argue that gas is cleaner at the point of combustion, it's certainly not cleaner at the point of extraction or than something like coal or oil. So I think we need to move beyond that kind of false binary of gas or oil or coal and start moving more aggressively in the direction of renewables.
Okay, so let me go back to the renewables. We have the highest renewable standard of any state in New England. That's our goal. The highest of any state in New England. We are making investments in renewables. We're doing it in a way that we say, hey, we're not going to spend the sky for renewables because I can't pass that bill on to all of these folks. It's unfair. I mean, you know, we have states that have signed on to 36 cents a kilowatt hour when the going price is less than 8 cents. Now, if I sign on for all these people to buy renewable energy at 36 cents or even 22 cents, they're going to pay it. And by the way, his business is going to pay. And at some point, that 22 cents a kilowatt hour versus less than 8 cents gets factored in, back in Germany probably, of whether it makes any sense to keep that factory, which is now employing 140 people, up 50 people this year, in our state. So you know, I'm not making false choices. I'm trying to protect jobs in our state. And so doing it in a way that is cleaner, cheaper, and more reliable, although not necessarily perfect, is the mantra that I'm pursuing. Not that I don't want to see wind, but we're not a good wind state. Not that I don't want to see solar, but it's not coming in at the right price at the moment. Not that I don't want to see other technologies develop. I want to see all of that happen, and I think, you know, we are going to see some of that happen in the coming years. But I spent a lot of time, I think you're starting to get the idea, I spent a lot of time in this area, and I've thought about it, and I'm honestly saying that Connecticut has to be competitive, and we're not. We've got to be cleaner and fess up to our obligations, and we are, and that natural gas is a bridge. The other most interesting thing about energy in North America right now is you can measure in a matter of months how long it's going to take for North America to be energy independent. 10 years ago, no one thought that was even possible in a 50-year period of time. Some of it's gas, some of it's hydroelectric in Canada, Some of it's solar and some of it's wind, but the idea that our continent is going to be energy independent